David Bickers.
Jazzy.
Really nice to see you
Yeah,
again.
good to
Thank
see
you
you,
so
mate.
much for coming to talk to us. So you've just come back from Lady B's house.
I have a message for you before we start anything talking about me and us and everything else. She was absolutely overwhelmed by your wing walk and your really essentially many congratulations for that.
Was he ever disappointed that nobody else with a disability was able to do what he did as a pilot in their Royal Air Force?
I would doubt it because I think when you enter into a war situation, if you're in the services it's one thing, when you actually go into a war situation nobody really wants to be in that situation. And he and everyone in that situation would be doing the job to the best they could whether they were able or disabled. And I don't think that would even cross his frame of reference. But in the same way that we have all these sadly injured people coming back, I mean there were an enormous amount of people that were injured around him in various ways, who then went on to sort of pioneer things like skin grafting or the use of artificial limbs, etc., etc. So when I flew with him, he had a Beechcraft, and which was given to him by Shell, because after the war he decommissioned himself again, went into civilian life, and was offered a job with Shell as an ambassador and also to set up their aviation side. And when he retired, they gave him the aircraft that he was allowed to use. And I did fly with him a few times. The first time from White Waltham, he and I, we taxied off. He was asked to open the air show in Cardiff, and I hadn't flown with him before, but within having cleared the communications with everybody, he then pulled out his pipe and said, "You take over, old boy." And I thought, well, what do I do? And he just quickly explained. And then the cockpit was full of tobacco smoke, and he was chortling away as I was working out what to do. And he then took over. We flew into Cardiff for the air show, and this fog just descended. And it meant that very few aircraft could actually be seen by the people who turned up. And then towards the end of the afternoon, it was pretty obvious that nothing else was going to happen. So he said, I think we should leave now. So we got into the Beechcraft, and as he took off, over his headphones, because I'm obviously wearing the headphones as well, was this announcement saying, it was from the Red Arrow, saying we're coming in. And this was because Douglas was there. They didn't want to disrespect, if you like. And whilst they couldn't be seen, they could be heard. We couldn't see anything. We were in fog and cloud. And as we came out, I just heard this phenomenal noise above. And I went, "Whoa, what was that?" And they just went straight past. And then we broke out of the cloud. And Douglas said, "Can you look for a railway line or a motorway, and we'll follow that back to Reading." And I then said, "Is that how you did it?" And he said, "Well, yes. If you got lost, you would look for a parallel line or a vertical line to take you home in some way. You'd eventually find a landmark." So if that was the expertise they had, I'm sure it was obviously far greater than that. But it was a very amusing moment.
Did the response from Douglas's death from the public take you by surprise in terms of how much he was loved, but the fact that how important he was?
Well, a few months earlier, Douglas had been the subject of This Is Your Life, so one was aware that he was definitely well loved by the amount of people who came on the show, because I think it was only the second time they'd ever done a 1-hour show, and that included a lot of people who'd flown with him for and against, and a lot of wonderful people. So I think you got a sense of certainly how he was respected at that level, but you had no real idea of how much he was respected within the disability community and the ability community. And we then thought, okay, well, we can't let that go away. If he stands for so much, we've got to work something out here. And the thought process, which also, in a sense, enabled us to be focused on something else, because it suddenly was a gap in all our lives. I mean, we were Douglas's second family. I'd known him for 7 years. He'd only been married to Joan for 8 years. We were all quite... Charlie was the first, and Tessa were the first grandchildren. We were all very young into the whole relationship in many ways, but well established. So it was a complete loss for us because he died at 72. We thought, well, that's too young. We felt, well, if he has that inspiration, we have to work it out, and we did. And I phoned up, well, a lot of Douglas's friends were in contact immediately anyway, so we then shared the idea and enlisted their support to create the charity, and they became the trustees of the charity. Well, you all know when you register charity, you have to have legally an object, and you don't want to be too tight. Yes, what we wanted to do was assist in whatever way we could at that time, what were referred to as the amputee community. 28 years on, there's sort of more political correctness, but also amputation can come from genetics and other causes. So I think at the time the lawyers were very good, so we had a slightly widened objective which allowed us to help what are now those with limb loss, but also we had a caveat which would be including those people with other disabilities that we could also assist. But primarily it was the amputee community as it was known then. But it took us 10 years to actually raise £1 million. Even in those days, there was competition amongst charity. So we settled on creating a rehabilitation and sports centre at Queen Mary's, Roehampton, where Douglas was looked after, and built a centre there which became more of a social centre and a gym, and then became a walking school. And at that point it was opened by Princess Diana. The original trustees 10 years later decided, we'll doff our caps, we've done our bit, and off we'll go. And I felt there was more to do, so was elected the chairman to carry on, and then we went into BARDA grants to help people with amputees who wanted to take on a challenge, as Douglas took up golf after the war, never played it before, handicap of 5.
Right.
And we helped all sorts of different people in that way, and still do. And then we've just sort of expanded beyond that brief into our current initiative, BARDA Braves, which is targeting children with limb loss and giving them their first experience of flying days, which I know is very much along in your heart as well. Luckily, with all the modern innovations, the internet was born, and we created a website which we call the Limb Loss Information Centre, and we just got as much information on there that we could collect and gather from different resources. So anything from, how do I play sport, where do I play sport, where do I fly, where's my nearest rehab centre, what sort of limbs are there, what am I going to feel during operation, pre-post, what is phantom pain. And this was almost a Q&A for not just the person about to undergo something, but family, friends, people who work with them, asking questions, having a place where they could find the answers. The word inspiration, Douglas stood for that then. He's inspired a load of people who just continue onward and upward to do so. Most recently I had an experience of getting to know Phil Packer, who, whilst not an amputee, was blown up in Basra. His spinal cord went, disabled from the waist down. He's now an ambassador of the charity. We participated in his recent marathon, where he cut his previous record by 12 days.
Wow.
26 hours, 26 charities he got involved with. And I think everyone has, if you have the right mental attitude and you realise there are ways for you to move on and prove yourself, I think that's the key thing. And hopefully we all can demonstrate that through the work that we do. I think on one of the first occasions, before I married into the family, I went with him to the Battle of Britain Ball, and walking up the steps, I had, like yourself, I was in the music industry, I had